Welcome to Stuff You Missed in History Class, a production of iHeartRadio.
Hello and happy Friday. I'm Tracy V. Wilson.
And I'm Holly Fry.
We spent all this week talking about the dictionary wars, first talking about Noah Webster and Joseph Emerson Worcester, and then talking about the dictionary wars themselves. It's probably clear that between Worcester and Webster, I have an obvious favorite, and it's Worcester. Because, while I can be a cranky person with weird opinions, I feel like it had some flavors of like Tesla versus Edison or other disputes where it felt like one person kind of became the underdog while another person kind of rolled over and became big, established, famous name.
Yeah.
I really wish that I knew more about Joseph Emerson Worcester's life and his personality and all of that. There just is way less information that I found about him than about Noah Webster. And I think that is more about Webster's name recognition and the fact that that Webster's dictionaries became such a staple, and not necessarily about each of their work, because they both did a ton of work.
Yeah.
Webster's maybe more broad in the kinds of things he was doing in terms of the dictionaries and the big compendium of infectious disease stuff, but they both published a ton besides the dictionaries.
They did. I struggle because as we talked through all this and I was reading your outline when you sent it over, I kept going and I understand it. It's not even a criticism, except then it becomes one of was Webster just kind of slapdash? He he had a lot of ideas, which I get, and he executed on those ideas. But when it came to consistency, he did not have it. And
right.
So...
And it's kind of hilarious to think about not having consistency
in a
when
dictionary.
The thing you're making is a dictionary. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm I get it. It's hard to track things, particularly. I mean, I find it hard to track things now in the digital age when everything is a searchable document. So I can imagine. But if you're trying to make a reference book, that seems not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And people would point out hey, in your earlier work, you spelled all these things this way. And he'd be like, well, just use the new one. And it was but all of these other ones are still in print. They're still around everywhere. And they don't agree with each other.
Yeah, there's a vibe of winging it. He's just spelling with his heart. I don't know. How does this sound like it's spelled today?
We didn't get into this at all, but this, the idea of English as the standard language and English being part of the national identity of the United States, obviously that has not gone away at all. There are still all kinds of ways that people judge other people for how they use English or don't. So yeah, it's the question of what does language mean in terms of the United States as a nation?
I mean, I have been thinking about this a lot lately because, you and I have both traveled to other countries. And I marvel at the fact that almost everywhere we go, they have bothered to learn English because we can't do the opposite.
Yeah.
And I know people will say, no, that is evidence of our importance and power. But honestly, there are also just times when I have been somewhere and they're oh, I speak enough broken English to get you through this. I couldn't do the same thing in reverse for most visitors to the U.S.
It honestly makes me really angry at this point in my life. I wish I knew multiple languages, but other than, an occasional Sesame Street piece in Spanish, I really didn't have any exposure to other languages until 1 year I had some Spanish in elementary school, but it was because I was in a gifted class and only the gifted kids got some Spanish. And then it was like, that was like a little bit where we learned sort of the letters and numbers and not a lot else. And then I had no other opportunity in public school to take a foreign language at all until middle school. And it was like, I would super love it if I had been learning two different
Yeah.
languages, if not from birth, at least from elementary school. But it was like not even offered.
Will it make you feel better when I remind you that I learned French as a kid and then forgot a lot of it anyways?
I mean, that.
I was pretty fluent when I was little, and then it just like went goodbye.
Yeah, I think that's also a pretty common experience for folks that like have families that include speakers of multiple languages, but like don't have the opportunity to keep speaking those languages as they get older.
Yeah, and that's not like that old, saying regarding riding a bike. I struggle with it still. It never like magically flashed back into my brain.
No. I for sure, when I started trying to relearn French as an adult, like it was easier to remember things that I had learned earlier. But it was not a case of where like I could suddenly test out of 23 levels of Duolingo or something like that based on what I had originally learned.
See, I did myself also the disservice of I did test out of the language requirement for college based on what I could scrap together, but I really wish I had not and had instead actually taken classes.
Yeah.
Because it would have reinforced all of my stuff.
Right. I did take French in college, but the French that I took in college, a lot of it was the same material that I had learned in high school because I started at like French 110, 120. And then when I tried to take French 210, 220, in my head, I was like, this is going to be so easy. I'm good at French, but I was good at French when it was the French that I had learned already. And so French 210, 220 was new stuff. And I had super overloaded my schedule that semester. And I was like, I can't do this. Like I signed up for way too many credit hours. And I wound up dropping French, which honestly I was only taking because I was planning to go to graduate school. And that was like recommended for students who were graduate school bound. It was not for the sake of being able to fluently converse in another language.
Yeah.
Working on this episode has just reminded me of like various things that people have criticized on the show in terms of words that we used and how we used them. Like I intentionally sometimes put the word task into an episode as a verb, which is in this one, because it's a word that sometimes people are like, I hate when people use task as a verb. That's my pet peeve. And it's like, what's a totally valid use of the word that has been used for hundreds of years?
Listen, I get pet peeves. I have a cajillion of them. Sure. But also, like, here's my thing, right? I have plenty of pet peeves. There is a list a mile long of things I wish people would not do on the internet. And most of them are not like the egregious things, although I hate those too, but just minor behavioral things that I do not like.
Sure.
But the onus is on me to deal with that, not to police other people.
Yeah.
Like, just learn to cope. People can send you that same meme 22 times. It doesn't hurt you, even if you become irritated. It's fine.
I think we also talked recently on the show about like each of us has worked as an editor for years and our literal job has been the accuracy and consistency of written work. But the older I get and the more I learn, the less I care about any of that in any other person's ordinary day-to-day life. Like I'm like, it's all made up. It does not matter.
It's all made up. And as I know we have said before, the more you edit, the more copy editing you do, the more you realize that the very, very best writers make mistakes or have
Mhm.
learned a word wrong, or so like it is not a mark of personal failure to like have a grammar issue or a spelling issue. It's just life. It's just being a human. And if I understood what you're communicating, stupendous.
Yeah.
No reason to get fussy. Do you remember the first time you realized that British English was different than American English?
I don't,
I
honestly.
have such a strong sense memory of this.
Yeah.
And I was quite young and I was just learning to spell. I feel like my memory is that I was 5 or 6. I don't know where that puts me on the spelling learning zone, but someone like a neighbor who
Mhm.
had traveled overseas had brought me back a coloring book, and it was spelled Colour. And I was like, this is misspelled. And then someone had to
Mhm.
explain to me, like, no, ma'am, there's actually
Yeah.
different ways to spell stuff. And that usually means if it's an English word that it's from Britain. And I was like, what? And then I felt like I had an exotic coloring book from another land.
That's so fun. I love it.
It felt very exciting to me. I did mention too that I would talk about how much I understand that moment where you are working for bosses that don't really maybe
Oh,
want
yeah.
what another person
Yeah.
might want. And I will not name any names, but I won't even name the industry. But at one point, I was hired by a smallish family business that had 2 bosses who were a couple who would give me wildly different directives.
Oh, no.
And I would be like, I don't know how to handle this. And I was
Mm-mm.
young enough that I didn't know how to handle that. And I did not
Yeah.
stay in that job very long. Um,
Yeah.
for
I really don't envy Worcester being in that position. Like,
No, it's
basically having
stressful.
bosses saying one thing and then have Webster, who was not his boss, but this was Webster's work with totally different needs and priorities. Like, that sounds the opposite of fun to me. I would not
No,
like that.
no. Uh,
Um,
I know we both have feelings about Webster, but do you
mhm.
know where he really just lost me?
Where?
I mean, kind of already, but when we find out that in his will he had like calculated a reduction of his daughter's inheritance
Yeah.
based on how he thought her husband had wronged him and would gain financially, I was like, you are so petty. Like,
Yeah. I don't think I described him as petty, but that's a good word.
there's a lot of petty moves going on in this whole story, not just on his part, but I'm just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Really? Like,
Yeah. I obviously, and people, I don't know, there might be people who take issue with it. I obviously had a lot of sympathy for Worcester and a lot of frustrations with Webster. And I found various, like brief summaries of Worcester's life that really framed him as, um, like a behind the times guy that was standing as a barrier to progress with the English language
mhm.
and was insisting that only British was good. And I was like, that's not my read on this at all. And then I was
Yeah.
like, did Miriam's PR guys write this? How long has this idea been like floating around?
Right?
Um So yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I
pettiness.
Springfield is not that far from here, and I have a feeling there is historical stuff related to all of these folks in that area. None of this is that far from here. I recognize I've had a lot of like 19th century New England in recent episodes, and it is not on purpose, and I am intentionally working on something that is not that for my next episode.
Oh,
Dictionaries.
dictionaries.
Yeah. I do love
Okay,
dictionaries.
how many dictionaries do you have?
Oh, I would have to think about
Well,
that.
I feel like this was an off the cuff question. I did not plan this. I feel like as it was coming out of my mouth, I was like, you know what? This is actually very hard because one, probably we both have lots of dictionaries that we've acquired and have kind of fallen out of use and they're sitting in a box somewhere. But
Yeah.
2, there are now a lot more different kinds of dictionaries, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like rhyming.
Yeah.
Thesaurus, does that count as a dictionary? Other language
Yes.
dictionaries, dictionaries of embroidery stitches, is that a dictionary? So I realized that was a bad question. I retract it.
Okay. One of the things that I will say that I do love is that through a library that I'm a member of, I have an Oxford English Dictionary login. And boy, do I love that. So to be totally honest, 90%, I would say 99% of my dictionary use in this day and age is either online or through an app. But I do still have a number of print dictionaries, including a Scrabble dictionary.
Nice.
A rhyming dictionary, a French-English, English-French dictionary.
Yeah.
I have a couple of dictionaries that are specifically obscure words or regional words, a couple of just like standard college dictionaries.
Star Wars visual dictionaries. Got a million of those.
Yeah. I might have some like Lord of the Rings dictionaries somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, the overwhelming majority of my dictionary lookup is either happening on the internet or like an app on my phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
So yeah,
it's so much faster.
It's a lot faster, and like some of them, like there's dictionaries on the shelf in the room with me right now. But have I pulled them off the shelf in a long time? No, I have not. So, whatever's happening on your weekend, I hope it's great. If you are the kind of person who likes to read the dictionary, or if there are some kids in your life who like to read the dictionary, I hope you get some good dictionary reading time in your schedule. We'll be back with a Saturday Classic tomorrow, which I believe may be dictionary related. Be back with a brand new episode on Monday. Stuff You Missed in History Class is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.